from the air. From the air.
Good evening. I'd like to welcome you to the February 27th, 2012 Washougal City Council Workshop Meeting. Rose, could you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Russell?
Here.
Councilmember Plinsky? Here. Councilmember Greenlee?
Here.
Councilmember Lindsay?
Here.
Councilmember McDaniel?
Here.
Councilmember Shoemaker?
Here.
Councilmember Freeman?
Present.
Thank you. Rose, we've got correspondence on here, but we don't typically do that for
No, we don't have.
workshops. Do we have any?
No.
Okay. At this time, I'd like to welcome any members of the public that would like to address council. Okay, we're going to get started right off. Our first item on the agenda is a presentation in regards to the municipal court. Chief Lackey, welcome. Larry, welcome. Chief, we'll let you take off and go where you will.
Okay. For those of you on council, you may remember, and for those that were not here a couple years ago, this business with the municipal court came up a couple of years ago. And the cities of Camas and Washougal have had municipal court services provided by the county for a number of years, and that system had worked well for that period of time. Late in 2009, I believe it was, we were notified by district court of their intent to move municipal court back to Vancouver. The reasons for that were budget situations at that time and declining revenues. Part of the way we paid for district court at that time was through court costs and tickets, that sort of thing. And as those revenues fell, and with the decline in the economy, they were no longer able to maintain services here. None of us, either the city, the city of Camas or here in Washougal, wanted to see municipal court go away. It was a great service to our citizens. It made it easier for our officers to appear in court. So we wanted to keep that here. So what was the next step? District court being under their budgetary requirements had to come to a decision pretty quickly, and we had to act fast. From that point, a series of meetings were conducted with the idea of, could we keep this here? Do we just let it go back to Vancouver? Or can we pull this off and do our own court here? Putting your own court service together takes a fair amount of time, so that was off the table. And we really wanted to keep it here. So after a series of meetings with the county, we came up with an agreement that I think both parties could live with in the short term, and that was to keep court here. The revenues were structured a little bit differently as far as how we pay for court, but fell within both cities' budgets, and we were able to keep it here. The downfall of that was now where we had a 5-day-a-week court operation, we were just limited to 2 days a week. So during this period of time, that allowed time for us to take a look at what other options and really explore, is something, can we do this ourselves, and is this something we want to do? So Larry and Chief Lackey have been exploring those options, and that's what they're going to present tonight. So what we're looking for, based upon their findings, is where do we want to go from here? Do you want to continue down this path? Do we just want to say, we're going to do this, and we'll just surrender this back to the court? But I think the information that Larry is going to present tonight will give you the information you need to let us know where we want to go.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, I think that's my segue. So I want to thank you for welcoming us back to what I believe is our third presentation to your council on this topic. And I guess you should know we presented this at the annual planning conference at City Camas, and it took over an hour. So realizing your time constraints, we pared this down to kind of what we consider the most important information. We're going to give you our presentation quick and fast. And then at the end of the presentation, like Chief Mitchell said, we believe we're to the policy decision point now. And so now we're kind of turning it over to the two councils to say, we're ready to pause, show you the information that we've gathered. And we're not claiming to be, 100% experts on all this, but we've gone far enough down the path to where the picture's clear enough that we think that you can make a policy decision based upon the information we've gathered. So if you recall when we gave you the update about 90 days ago, Larry has been traveling the state and he's been making a bunch of calls and talking to people. And so we think in this brief presentation, we're going to try to keep it to around 20 minutes and then maybe 10 minutes for questions and answers, that we can get to the core of this, which is asking you where you want to go from here with the policy decision. So Larry's going to handle most of it. I'll jump in for a few slides. Your city attorney's here, your city prosecutor, who may have an opinion to share with you, and then at the end of this, we'll be asking you where you want to go with it. So Larry Linné is our court security officer, if you recall, for the city of Camas and Washougal. And he also took on an added role of, we put a few hours a week on his normal time, and he's been working on this court project since probably, 6 or 8 months ago. Okay, so Larry, go ahead and take it away.
Thanks, Chief. Mayor, Council, thanks for having us back. Try to do both here. Again, this is just some of the information that I've been able to gather, put it in a form for you tonight. First thing is some of the people I called, talked with. I'm not going to spend a lot of time with them, but I would like to especially thank Scott Russin and David Schultz, the two city attorneys that let me pick their brain and ask them a lot of questions throughout the process. Of course, the big question you already heard, should we continue our court with the contract that we have with Clark County, or should we go out on our own and provide judicial and correction services? How does it work right now? The chief spoke a little bit about that. We contract with Clark County through an interlocal agreement. Camas has been the host agency, and it's a split expense formula of 70 and 30. Why would Clark County agree to provide these services? Chief?
Yeah. I wanted to point out here that, in essence, Clark County has a business model that they've settled in on a few years ago, which is they provide this service for themselves in district court, and then they provide it to us because they're doing it anyway as part of their business model. But they've decided a few years ago that when they provide services, they're not going to provide them at a loss anymore. So as part of their business model, they have built this into, it's a revenue generation stream for the county. And it's not a bad thing, because I guess if we were providing services to other municipalities, we might look at that as an opportunity to collect some revenue also. But with the county, I guess there's a difference between how we interact as partners and how we interact with partners with the county. When we share services currently for, say, court or for animal control, we don't build in overheads. We pretty much just use direct cost modeling. So if we're splitting animal control like in a 50-50 basis, if the program costs X, at the end of the business year, 50% of X is yours, 50% of X is ours. The county cost modeling is different. So we want to just point that out.
When I was here in the fall, the mayor gave me a couple names of people that weren't really on my radar that he said were people that he had come in contact with that might be able to provide me some good information. One of them happened to be Jeff Hall, who's the head administrator for the Office of Courts for the state of Washington. And I called him up and picked his brain a little bit, so to speak, but I asked him, is this a good idea? Is this something we should consider? Is this something maybe we're way out of line trying to do? And his response was this quote, and basically when considering a switch in court, we need to ask two questions. One, are we happy with our current level of service? And two, are we getting a fair return on the money? And it's this quote that kind of served as a theme for putting this together, and we kept asking these questions over and over again as we talked with different people. The first part, customer satisfaction, In looking at everything, we feel that we're somewhat satisfied with the service that we're getting from Clark County. There's been some things that have come up along the way that we've had to address, but they're not our employees, and some of those issues are rather difficult. Now, the county's been a good partner. They have a real good sense of court operation and a desire to see things done correctly. But are we getting a fair return on our money? In our analysis, and we'll show more of this later in more detailed information, but what we found in doing some cost analysis, doing some personnel costs and some corrections costs, our position is that we feel we can operate the court at a substantial reduced cost for both communities. What role does corrections play in a court discussion? This is where it kind of gets interesting. The corrections component is just an extension of the judge, and I kind of want to use Judge Gonzalez up in Battleground maybe as an example, where he can order sentences for people. He can order them to do certain things like attend an AA meeting, get an alcohol evaluation, do some work crew. And each one of those sanctions can be different with each individual. In other words, if he has one person that's been kind of a frequent flyer in their court, he can hold him more accountable by asking him to come back the following week. He can let others come back in 6 or 8 weeks. Now, every time he has a sanction for somebody and puts them into the corrections program, that costs money. Currently, we pay money for these programs, and as you'll see a little bit later, not only do we pay for it on top of the client, but there can be some additional costs at the end. Currently, each corrections program that we have now in our court does include administrative overhead of 26.33%. And this money that I'm talking about is the corrections-based revenue. When the defendant is sentenced, he's expected to pay a fee to Clark County. Not only does he pay a fee, but we pay a fee to Clark County for that. And currently we're paying for electronic home confinement, pretrial interviews, and supervision of the clients.
So I wanted to tell Larry I wanted to jump back in about this slide, because when we talk about taking over this court, what we're really talking about is two different programs. And one, it's court, and it's also corrections-based programs. So many of you might read the Post-Record, and you might always see that maybe somebody receives a ticket for, say, driving while suspended. And you'll see that the judge imposed a sentence of a $5,000 fine with $4,900 suspended and a 365-day jail sentence with 363 days suspended. So what the judge can do is impose the maximum sentence and then turn around and keep the person under the jurisdiction of the court in a corrections program. And in that corrections program, the judge, when we say an extension of the judge, it's during that period of time, that the rest of that year, that 363 days, by placing the person in some sort of a probation program, an electronic home confinement program, one of these other corrections-based programs, that person is still under the control of the court. So what we're going to talk about when we talk about switching back to a local court model is we're not going to have a probation department. There won't be probation employees that do nothing but run around and check on people. Many communities our size run these types of programs where the judge is the probation, the head probation person. So that's what we kind of wanted to paint the picture of, is instead of thinking about, like at the county where they have a whole probation department, we're proposing a model where the judge himself is a probation officer, the chief probation officer, so to speak. And Larry mentioned Judge Greg Gonzalez in Battleground. And what Judge Gonzalez does is, instead of having a probation officer who in the county model, tracks a person and goes out to check on him once a month. If the judge wants to see the person once a month, he has the court clerk summons the person into court once a month, and he checks up on him. So it's more labor intensive for the judge, so to speak, but the judge can set his own calendar with the help of the court clerk as to who he wants to see or not want to see. And in the model that's used in Battleground, which is what we would propose to copy, you have your chief court clerk or your court manager basically monitoring things like the jail to tell the judge if somebody has turned up in jail who was before the judge 6 or 8 months ago. They monitor the jail rosters. There's many side benefits too. Sometimes they catch people who are in jail who, maybe we're paying a daily jail fee on, which that's not a part of this discussion, but they sometimes can move to take those people out of the county jail, move them up to Skamania County where there's a lower rate. We both use the Skamania County Jail for that. But we did want to paint this picture for you. When we talk about court, we're talking about corrections programs, and we're talking about just the typical running of the court. In the last slide, we highlighted the term administrative overhead. If you recall when we were here a year ago, when we were just taking over the building to keep it local, we talked a lot about the savings we could have, and in moving the building to just a local building where we pay the rent and we pay many of these things like the telephone and the electricity, we're saving a 26% overhead fee that we used to pay to the county. So when we rent the port building for, say, $3,000 a month, and when we pay all of the bills associated with just the infrastructure, this year right now we're saving 26% on every dollar we spend just by paying it directly. So we're not paying that administrative overhead. And as we talk about corrections programs and talking about moving to a local court model, a big piece of the savings is getting rid of that indirect cost, that administrative overhead. Our feeling is, whether it's myself or Larry or we hire a new court manager, these are employees who are here anyway. We're here doing a function, so that why charge each other back and forth this administrative overhead? Now, where we have to go out and hire a new person, that's a direct cost, and it makes sense to charge that to the program. So we did want to just, I guess, clarify, and we're going to move into the next slide. We're going to start talking about numbers, that in our model, we're thinking about the judge is also the probation officer.
Could I ask a question at this point?
Absolutely.
I'm not exactly clear on what kind of cases district court handles as opposed to the next level up.
Yeah, district court and superior court are distinguished between district court can only hear misdemeanors and gross misdemeanor cases. So the more serious crimes are all heard in superior court. And there are no fees for those, because when someone violates a law, you often hear like it's read the person versus the state of Washington. So if you commit a homicide or a rape, you are, in a sense, you have violated the laws of the state and you have offended all of the people of the state, and those costs are all picked up by the county directly. However, on misdemeanor crimes or gross misdemeanor crimes, those are crimes, or municipal crimes, those are crimes that we are responsible for as municipalities. They occurred in our jurisdiction, and under Senate Bill 6211 that was passed approximately 10 or so years ago, we're responsible for any costs related to those. So that's why we have to pay our daily jail cost if we incarcerate someone. So on felony crimes, those have no financial impact on us. Those are crimes against the state. Misdemeanor or gross misdemeanor crimes, those are crimes that we prosecute. Typical crimes, driving violations that are serious, driving while suspended, driving while intoxicated, domestic violence, assaults, thefts.
Then, for a particular case, does the judge, the district court judge, have the option to push the case up to the next level? For example, before trial, can he say, well, this is a gross misdemeanor that I want tried in the county, with county close to the county jail and all of those kinds of things?
As I understand it, no, and that would be a great question for Scott, but I don't believe you can make a misdemeanor or gross misdemeanor a felony just because it would be closer or more convenient.
The answer would be no. The prosecutor is the one that actually files the charge. So with the felony prosecutor with the county, they would be filing the charges. The judge has no bearing whatsoever on filing the charge. The judge can't dismiss a charge unless a motion's brought before and he finds a legal reasons to dismiss. So that would be up to the prosecutor itself. So I can, as the misdemeanor prosecutor here in Washougal, I cannot handle any felony prosecutions. All those would go up to there. I cannot send one of my cases up to them. I would send it to the felony prosecutor to make a decision whether or not they want to charge. If they don't charge, they'll send it back to me, and then I have to come up with a misdemeanor if one applies.
And then as part of that is after a trial, suppose it's a gross misdemeanor and there's a conviction and it's one of these people that, shall we say, the court has seen before. Does the court at that point have the option to send them into a full county probation program rather than community corrections?
After someone is sentenced in our municipal court here for a misdemeanor or gross misdemeanor, pretty much everyone that pleads to a crime or is found guilty of a crime is put into probation. They're all put on bench probation for 2 years. And they're monitored, all of the conditions of their sentence are monitored by the county corrections program. So they monitor all crimes that are found guilty.
So I was just curious if community corrections is less expensive because it involves less supervision, and therefore it's a good thing in a lot of ways. But I just wondered if at the judge's option he could say, well, this is a bit harder case and we'd like to push that to the next level of supervision.
On those questions, let's go ahead and hold those to the
Okay.
end. If you could write them down and make sure that we make it all the way through the presentation.
Our current costs for court personnel, for the court to be open 2 days a week, we're paying $152,000 salary, benefits, and overhead. And corrections, again, for supervision, electric, home confinement, and pre-trial interviews, we're paying $119,000 a year, combined both cities. What would it cost to have a court open 5 days a week? We're estimating $210,000, and that's to hire the employees we think we need to sustain a model that could do both the court and the corrections function. So where's the savings if we're coming to you asking for $210,000 and we're currently only paying $152,000? Just as we've been talking about this judicial probation, where the judge acts as the probation manager, and for Scott, the chief, kind of go over this a little bit. In this model, though, most of the costs associated with the corrections would shrink or go away. There's still going to be a small portion that I think you're concerned with, of certain people that need to be on active probation, and there still will be a component to cover that. So with the model that we're talking about, I think we can reasonably expect that we could save over $100,000 annually. This is a conservative estimate, whereas our personnel costs, we're looking at maybe at the higher end of things. This doesn't include revenues that could be generated by the corrections functions. It doesn't include the fee structure, which would be coming back to us rather than going to Clark County. So there's a lot of issues financially that we need to look at yet. So this $100,000 is conservative by our research.
This is my part again, and to talk about, well, some of you have heard, and I've heard, that one thing cities don't want to get into is running their own probation department. There are several very scary cases out there across the state of Washington where someone was supposed to be on active monitoring in a probationary status, and somehow that person got lost track of, and they went out and they reoffended and they hurt someone. And in those cases, lawsuits followed, and often with big judgments to the municipalities. So the premise attaches under the public duty doctrine that if you owe a duty to the public and you're a government agency, you better follow through and perform that duty. So this concept of active monitoring is what we want to talk about. And we are both WCIA cities for our risk management pool. And WCIA has advised their cities that you don't want to take on the active monitoring component of probation. So what we're here to tell you today is that there are still some offenders out there who the city attorneys and the judges are going to say, you know, this person's had 2 or 3 DUIs and, you know, they really need some active monitoring. And we would still propose, even if we went to a local court, that we maintain interlocal agreements with county corrections to take on that handful of clients who need active monitoring. But like you just heard the counselor say, we found out a couple years ago that as just a standard process for every single person who came before the court, that they were put onto a probation status list for up to 2 years. Well, through the county's cost modeling, we pay a fee between 65 cents, and it's up and down. It's been as high as 90-some cents a day for that person to remain on a list. And county corrections has different, they are the ones to decide whether or not they actually go out and check up on the person, if the person has to self-report. Some people who just owe fines or something just check in online and let them know where they are. The city of Camas about a year and a half ago, through David Schultz, our city attorney, started to approach the court, and when the court went to put someone onto that 2-year probationary status, said, "No, stop. We don't want them on. We don't want this person to be on some sort of monitoring status. We're not concerned about them. Maybe they had a very minor crime, like maybe a 19-year-old or a 20-year-old male who had an MIP charge." And Mr. Schultz said, you know, we're really not concerned. We don't need any active monitoring for this person. We don't need him to be on a list for 2 years or more where we pay a daily fee just for him to exist on the list. And we literally were getting quarterly bills of thousands and thousands of probationary days. So we're not saying that there aren't a handful of violators out there who really need to be checked up on. They do. And we want to keep the ability to follow up on those people, have somebody go knock on their door, make sure they live there, have somebody check with their employer, have somebody, if they're in anger management class, make sure they attended, have somebody, if they're in alcohol, some sort of alcohol class that they have to attend, make sure they attended it, make sure they pay their fines. But there's a big lion's share of these people out there who maybe they don't need that level of monitoring. So our risk management pool, WCIA, Washington Cities Insurance Authority, has given us advice that says, we don't ever want you to go into the active monitoring business of probation. Don't set that up ever. And under the judge's judicial immunity, the judge can say to somebody, you know, I want to see you here again in 3 months, and I want to see if you have gotten a job, or I want to see if you've paid that fine, and just schedule him back. And because the judge has judicial immunity, he's not susceptible to that civil lawsuit like we might be as a municipality.
So back to our question, are we getting a fair return on our money? As you've heard, with the corrections component, not even considering court fees, we feel that as an independent court, we could substantially reduce the costs that we're paying. What are our options? As we see it now, first of all, stay with Clark County, continue our current contracts. 2, attempt to renegotiate, talk to Clark County about maybe looking at things a little differently financially. Or 3 would be to transition to an independent-run municipal court for Camas and Washougal. The first one, obviously, it's no change. It's less of a burden. Things are going pretty well. There's not huge problems. We wouldn't have to worry about employees. We wouldn't have to worry about any of this corrections component. We could renegotiate, but in the current light of the economy, I don't think that's going to happen. So the third would be to transition to a court. And really what we're saying here is that we're going to take on some problems. Things won't be real easy at the start, but we're going to take on a few problems to save some money. Benefits to leaving the county, I'll run through these quick. We think we can improve customer service, more consistency, fewer personnel changes. Just since I've been at the court in a little over 4 years, I think I've seen between 8 and 10 lead clerk changes. We can establish what's best for us, not what's best for Clark County. The clients would be paying out less. They wouldn't be paying the monthly $100 fee to be monitored. Savings in corrections, no rotating judge. Currently, a different judge comes out once every 5 weeks, and we could be open 5 days a week. Some of the concerns, if we move from the county, and I just want to say one thing about this, and that is that these are issues that were raised by other individuals. These are statements from people that say if we switched over, they would worry about this. And the chief spoke about the concerns for active monitoring. The Clark County folks think we would lose strong legal support. They think it would be more workload for city attorneys. And I think I just have Scott comment on that real quickly. Maybe also Scott on the jury trial process.
As far as losing strong legal support and free legal services, I'm not really exactly sure what they're talking about. I've never received a brief from the county or anything of that sort, other than maybe sitting down and chatting with judges about certain legal issues. But creating more workload for the city attorneys, I don't know whether it would create any additional workload for us, other than the initial process of setting up the court and any assistance that we might provide with that. But once we get rolling, it would be the same as we have now. What was the other question?
Maybe about jury trials.
Well, jury trials, right now, if we have right now what we have is we have a 5 rotating judge system. And if we were to set over a case, because we need more time to work on it, we have to set it over a whole 5 weeks. And sometimes that gets a long distance out. It's the same for jury trials. Right now we have court here in Washougal for all the pretrial issues and for all traffic infractions. But if we actually have a jury trial, we have to go down to Vancouver court and have the trial on the judge's schedule there. I think if we actually had a court here, we would change that, and we would have the trial here in Camas Washougal. That would be more convenient for our officers, more convenient for the people on trial, for any of the witnesses that are there, and I think that would be more efficient.
How many jury trials have you had this last year?
As far as jury trials, we don't hardly have very many at all. Neither the city of Camas or Washougal. Maybe we have 4 or 5 a year together would be the number of jury trials.
And we talked about the overhead and therapeutic courts, which Scott, you could have mentioned that, but we use them very frequently. Maybe we have 2 or 3 people in them right now. If we switch, what's the process? A 1-year notification to Clark County by statute, 120 days on the interlocals. The big thing here would be picking a starting date, and we've projected January 1st, 2014. That would give us time to do some hiring and do the notifications, and also some additional time to continue looking at this process.
Larry, and maybe I'll just take this and finish up. We have just a couple slides left. So, you know, like we said, this is kind of a disclaimer. You know, I'm a police chief, and Larry's a retired police officer and our court security officer. So we're not here claiming to be experts on this, but we do know enough about it now to give you what we'll call some maybe informed opinions. And it's our informed opinions that we presented today that you can kind of judge. We're leaning towards we think this is a good idea for you to go. Larry, if you want to hit the next slide. you know, one of the questions we ran by the Camas City Council was the reverse of this. What if you guys decided today as a policy decision that you really didn't want to participate? Well, we still could probably do it, but we'd be right at maybe the break-even mark. And then if you're not really going to save money, I would tell you it's not a good idea to do to the Camas City Council, because like we said before, we're somewhat satisfied that, you know, the county runs a good court system. That's not what this is about. This is about tough financial times, where as a community, the two communities, if we can save between $100,000 and $200,000, you guys can do things with that money. You can provide some services that maybe that have been cut. You can restore some things. So this is mainly to that part of the equation that Jeff Hall said about, are you getting a fair return? We don't think that there's a fair return, only in the sense that we can probably do it here locally at a much cheaper price. So this is an equation that's like asking, do you shop at Nordstrom's if you're on a Kmart budget? You know, and it's a quality and a cost modeling thing. So the question for you guys is, well, what if we decided not to participate? Would this still be a good idea for you to go forward with until your chief and the city attorney set it up? Probably not, because our current court costs are all split based upon a formula about the number of cases, the number that we're putting into it. And we're doing about 70%, and you guys are 30%. So for you to set up your own court without a cooperative agreement with Camas would be a money loser. It would cost you way more than you're currently paying, and you'd have to duplicate, or you'd have to go to the county and say, well, we still want you to run our court, at which time they probably would ask you to come to Vancouver, because it really wouldn't make sense for them to come out here just for you. So this is an equation that, when we work together, makes great business sense. If we part ways, it's really not that good of a deal. So our initial first steps really come down to, if we set that target date at 20 months from now, January 1st, 2014, we kind of got to get working on this. We're talking about setting up a city department, hiring some people, getting a judge contract in place. And 20 months can go by pretty quickly when governments, you know how your system works. Every 2 weeks there's a workshop, and then there's a council meeting, and time does go by quickly. So what we're here tonight to do is to not ask you for a totally firm commitment. There's still a date to back out. Larry, let's just kind of swip by the court, go to the recommendation. We're really asking you if you think this is the right direction that we're heading. And if you think this is the right direction, you can head nod it or take a vote or whatever. But we want to know if we think we've got it right or not. And then lastly is there's no firm commitment that's needed here. I think Clark County wants our business, and if we still investigate and continue down this path for another 3 to 6 months, and somebody gets cold feet and they say, you know, gosh, let's abandon this program and let's stick with the county, I think they would welcome us to stay with open arms. You know, we don't have to cancel that interlocal, and we don't have to give notice to them until a year out. And even in that year, my gut tells me in the conversations I've had that if we wanted to stay, they'd say that's okay. And so that really brings us down to the end of our presentation and kind of the question and answer period. So again, I apologize because I'm not sure if this made total sense. We probably kind of screened out about half of our slides. Mr. Mayor?
Let's go around the dais kind of in order. Just impressions from each of you individually on if you think that we're going the right direction, and then a follow-up at the same time with any questions that you have on the presentation as it was given. Kind of Joe?
Sounds good so far. Question I was curious about was the jury. Would it come from Camas Washougal residents?
Probably not. Jury pools are drawn from driver's licenses, is my recollection.
Voters registration?
Voters registration?
Yeah.
Okay. So it would be, if it's voters registration, it would be that pool. And
It's countywide then?
As far as I know, yes, it's from the county.
I believe that the Battleground, the way they do it, is the Battleground Court handles Battleground, Ridgefield, and the center. So it's all three of those communities. So I think they just draw their jury pool from those communities. That would be one burden that we'd be taking on. But then we have the trials, so few of them that I don't think that would be that significant.
Good, thank you.
Dave?
I like the direction you're going, and I really appreciate the work that everybody's done on this. And the one question that comes to me is, and as I wrote the questions down that I had, you answered them. Great briefing. The one question that remains unanswered for me is this an essential government function which requires the use of municipal employees as opposed to contractors?
Yes and no. First, is it an essential government function? Yes. You have a statutory requirement as a city to provide this function. You're not able to advocate it. Say you just wanted to close up shop, you thought, hey, as a moneymaker, we won't have a court, and the county will be forced to take it. They have statutes in place that prohibit that from happening, and the county would be able to come in and just impose the cost onto you for taking that over. So it is an essential government function. But then you have the question of, could we contract for it? And the answer is absolutely. And in a sense, you're currently contracting for it, because the $152,000 that Larry quoted is what's remaining, and what we're buying from the county is we're buying people. That's all we're contracted for left, is we're contracting for the judge, his judicial assistant, and 1.5 FTEs who come out here, travel out here and function the court for us. So we're currently contracting for the bodies. All other expenses we're paying directly. This proposal is saying, why not just go the whole mile and just make those bodies city employees? The city of Camas is proposing to be the host agency, so they would be Camas city employees, except the judge, who the judge would be an appointed contract employee. However, the whole presentation really is coming down to, are we better off to continue the contract, or should we hire employees? Did that make sense? Did that answer your question?
Yes, and I guess what I'm driving at is, do the employees for the court have to be governmental employees, or can they be contractors?
Oh, I see where you're going. Like, could you have a private court? I don't know that one. My instincts tell me that the way that the state controls through the state office of courts pretty tightly. I'm not sure if you could have, private citizens or a private company. I've never seen a private company that came in and ran as a court in the state of Washington.
I have a feeling that under RCW, it's an essential governmental function, and therefore you can't do that. But I was just curious.
We can check on that. This Jeff Hall, who Mayor Gard directed us to, his whole job, he does nothing but work on court transitions for the state. He helps out municipalities like ourselves. So I'm willing to bet if Larry places a call to him, he'll have a quick answer for that. And we'll get that back to you on that.
Appreciate that very much. Jennifer.
Yes, actually, I'm also very interested, and I think that the research is very convincing. I'm kind of interested in the electronic home monitoring systems, and a little bit more of a detailed question about that. Are we going to be responsible for purchasing all of this equipment, and then are we going to be in charge of all the monitoring between the two policing departments, or how does that work?
You can either contract out with a private provider. Most of the jurisdictions what's the organization?
WASPIC.
WASPIC. WASPIC will provide a community with the devices, so you wouldn't be buying them. They would give them to you, and then they would monitor the individual and give a daily report to the judge through email, and then he would monitor whether they're in compliance or not. We would be dispensing the actual equipment and sticking with it until they're done, have met their sanction.
Okay, so that system is contracted out. We don't need to purchase anything, and that's something that they will also...
Can be.
It can be.
I see.
And so if we use, maybe say, let's look at what most people do. WASPIC stands for the Washington Association of Sheriffs and Police Chiefs. And they perform this function through a contract private company. And the typical cost per offender day is between $5 and $8. And for that fee, we have to put the equipment on, but it's all given to us. So let's say Larry, as a court security officer's function would be to put the bracelet on the person. And then that person's monitored by this company. And if they call up the home and the offender can't get his bracelet near the phone or the device, and he is judged to not be home or not be compliant, This company notifies the judge, who then can summons the person into court and either find that he's not in compliance with the judge's order or is. Now, we currently, both cities, Camas and Washougal, buy electronic home confinement from the county. There's maybe no better, I guess, illustration, I'm glad you asked, about the financial swing on this. Currently, we pay about $11 per day for any person to be on electronic home confinement. So multiply that times 30 days in a month. It's over $300 we pay, the city pays. The county also charges the person to be on electronic home monitoring $15 a day. So now they're paying another $450 to be on this program. And so combine those, you have $750. Then if the person is on active monitoring status through county probation, they pay an added $100 a month flat fee to be monitored, to be in any probation system. So right now, electronic home monitoring for us is a money loser. We write a check that goes to the county. But if on our court model, if we had the person that just went to our judge and the judge put him on EHC, we would still charge that person a fee, but that we would no longer be sending checks out. We would be collecting fees. Now, the City of Battlegrounds fee is $20? $20 a day. So there's $600 a month coming our way, no money going out of the system except for the daily fee, that $5 to $8. So again, we take something that's losing money right now and we turn it into a part of the profit generation, which we didn't count that in the at least $100,000 savings. We said we didn't count what could be like profit generation revenue programs. This is one of those.
Okay. Another question. How many?
How many people? How many people in
Oh.
Camas Washougal? I'm sorry, Jennifer. How many people roughly?
I think we figured we have 1,000 EHC days a year. Does that sound right?
Yes.
That's quite a bit. Okay.
So it's hard to say if that is, because of the way we're billed, if it's 10 people who have 100 days or if it's 100 people who have 10 days. So we have billable days, about 1,000 billable days per year.
Okay.
So if you could turn that into even a $10 a day profit, right? Say you had $8 going out, you charge 20, it's a $12 swing towards the city's favor. If it was $10 a day and you had 1,000 billable days per year per the two communities, you have a $10,000 check that's in your bank now to the positive.
Okay. And then one more question. On the concerns if we move from the county slide, there was something about a therapeutic court, lose ability to participate in therapeutic courts. If you can talk about that a little bit.
Yes, most of the, I believe that both cities are a match with all of the therapeutic courts that are currently out there. There's a veterans court, there's drug court, there is a mental health court.
Veterans court, mental health court, substance abuse court.
Yeah.
And then there's
Homeless court, but we're not currently in that. Yeah. So therapeutic courts, if you recall your presentations, the theory is, let me use the veterans for an example. Maybe a veteran has committed an assault. There's an underlying problem. He came back from Iraq and he really has some post-traumatic stress issues. And if you cure the underlying condition, then the person's really not subject to reoffend and recidivism, which is expensive. So therapeutic courts try to treat maybe the cause and not really spend these criminal justice dollars on these expensive programs. You know, throwing someone in jail for a long period of time is very expensive. If we went away from the county's district court, we were told, well, one of the disadvantages is you would not be able to be involved in district court therapeutic courts because a lot of them are started with grant monies. In talking to the city attorneys and in talking with other judges, they have said, well, that's really not a problem because we can craft individualized plans. The city attorneys have great leeway in dealing with their clients. And if they believe that there's an underlying issue because the person's a veteran or the person has a substance abuse issue, I don't believe that they have any constraints with crafting their own program. And these people there's not a lot of them that we currently send towards the therapeutic courts anyway that are from Camas and Washougal that we're aware of. But Scott, do you have anything more to add to that?
I think the one thing that we would miss is that when they go to the therapeutic court, often, again, these courts are created because there's some sort of grant money to it, and the grant money is really often for the actually providing the therapy for them. And so they have money for these people that probably can't afford therapy themselves. So they come to this court, they participate, and then they have this money that will serve them. I'm not completely sure whether or not we would not be able to participate in these court, because I think some of this money is used or collected on a countywide basis. So we might be able to get in maybe one or two of the courts, still participate in them. But again, the numbers of people that we send are very few. In the city of Washougal, I probably sent maybe 5 people because they have to have conditions. And part of the reason is they have to want to be in the court. So we don't send that many. So it's a small number of people. It's helpful for those people that need it. And we still might be able to use them.
Thank you.
No, I'm finished. Thank you.
Because this is a change, what are the upfront expenses of the time from start to the implementation of this?
Well, the tough part will be the transition. Let's say 6 months. Let's say that we were going to transition with the January 1st, 2014 start date. Right now, like in the next 30 days, we'd have like 0 transition costs. But the closer you get to that date, you'd see that line start to pick up with costs. At some point, you're going to have to go out and hire your first employee. And likely, there's a point that's, it's going to be before January 1st, 2014. So there's going to be some duplication in startup costs in that window. Let's say that the court manager, we believe the court manager is probably the most key person to get this thing up and rolling. Let's say we hired the court manager 4 months before the actual implementation day. So in that 4 months, you're still paying the county for their employees. Now you're paying for your own court manager. They have to then bring on another clerk that they would be interviewing that would start maybe, say, 2 months out or a month out, whatever the training window is. And then you have to get your judge in place. At least on the judge's contract, you could have it, maybe 30 days out, so there could be a transition of cases. But there is a duplication window where you're bringing your people on so that they're ready to hit the ground running January 1st. You can't just all start them on January 1st. They're going to have to start sometime before. And that cost would be whatever that prorated piece for however many months of their salary and benefits. Luckily, we're still paying all of the infrastructure. The electricity doesn't go up, it doesn't change, the phone bill doesn't change, the rent doesn't change. All of those things stay standard and set. So it's the duplication of employee costs for startup.
Thank you.
Just, and off the top of my head, it seems appropriate to me that the jury pool would come from within the jurisdictional area of the court. And then, but my question is, how feasible is it to run a part-time court? What do they do in Battleground? Are they 5 days a week, 8 hours a day? What do they do?
It's very feasible to run a part-time court. If you look around the state, how many small communities they are versus places like Tacoma, Seattle, Olympia, or Vancouver, running a part-time court it is very feasible. And so in the Battleground model, Battleground has a court 1 day a week, and they have night court, I believe, that they've added for convenience to their citizens. What you do for if you can't, if you don't have enough cases to justify a full-time court, a full-time judge, then the statutes allow you to appoint a judge. If you're under 35 hours a week? If your judge isn't working 35 hours a week or more, you can appoint a judge. If they're over that, then you have elections and you elect your judge. But your cases, the number of cases you put into the system drive how much you need a judge. Currently, we're actually, between the two communities, we're filling up that first day. And there's been discussions with the district court judges about we're right almost getting near the tipping point of needing some more time, either a second day or maybe like Battlegrounds, maybe a few hours a night to hear traffic cases or something. However, we're nowhere near needing 5 days a week of court services.
Great, thanks. You've done a great job on this project. I'm sure it's been a lot of hours and a lot of thought, and I want to thank you all for that and for all the other people that are on that list of names. I'm sure it was also kind of interesting too, wasn't it?
Well, if I know anything about court, I'm the parrot here. Larry has been the legwork guy and has taught me all of this, and so he's been the guy to get most of these questions answered. And, you know, we're looking at this critically just from the standpoint of, you know, dollars are tight for us. And, you know, we're all trying to keep the employees that we have that are out there providing services every day. So when we've met with people from the county, we've gone overboard to thank them. They have been good partners for a long time, and we're not taking this step lightly. They provide a very good court service to us, and we should be thankful for that. But as I guess a steward of the citizens' money, the taxpayers' money, you know, it is fair to ask, can we do it ourselves, and can we do it as well as they do at a lower price? And I think that's the question that we're proposing to you, is we believe, just as a recommendation committee, we think that we can do that. Now, we're not completely down that road. We're not claiming to be experts on every issue. We think there's maybe more study to be done, especially really crunch some numbers, answer questions like Councilman Lindsay's. When do you start these people? You know, really get some firm figures in place. But before we really take those extra steps, we want to make sure to check in with you guys that we're on the right path.
And just as an aside, it does seem like a good idea to move forward with this. Knowing what I know now, I would support that. The only other comment I have to make is that Camas and Washougal are growing probably faster than a lot of the other parts of Clark County. And at some point, there certainly is a critical mass at which point you have your own district court. And it sounds to me like we're pretty close to that point now. And if you look forward not too many years, we're definitely there. And so it seems like a good idea to get into this at this point.
Thank you. We had those same thoughts. Collectively, we're a community of about 35,000 right now and growing. So, you know, you have a very good police department. You have a very good city staff, and we think just as fondly of our people in Camas. And, you know, we think we can do this and provide good services to our citizens and do it at a, maybe let's say at just a lower cost than we're currently buying it for. But what Larry pointed out in the study is true. Who wants to bring on a new city department right now? Who wants to, you know, hire more employees at a time we're trying to control, you know, salaries and benefits are of concern? So we don't propose this lightly, and this would be added headache, added bureaucracy. Somebody's got to supervise these people. You know, it's going to be more work, but it makes sense maybe to take on that more work if you really can return that revenue savings back to the two communities that then can be spent by you guys.
Karen?
I might have missed it, but you said currently we're filling up a full day and running into the second day with court cases?
Well, Larry's in court every week, and sometimes he doesn't
Okay.
get back till about 5:30 or 6, and that means there's been a long court day.
Right.
So court starts on Thursdays at 9 o'clock, and sometimes they get lunch, sometimes they don't. And on busy court days when they have, you know, lots of attorneys and lots of clients in court, you know, they stick there at night until they're done with the docket.
I was just missing that piece of the one, you know, we're filling up a day currently, and do we expect to be running 5 days of court in
Oh, no.
No? Okay.
No, we're nearing the tipping point of maybe needing another day,
Okay.
or maybe even another half day. So
Gotcha.
the court growth of your cases is incremental.
Okay.
And right now, we fill up a day every week. Every Thursday is court. So even if we went to our new court, we just might, you know, it wouldn't be long probably, whether we stay with the county or do our own, we'd probably be adding another 4 hours of court somewhere.
Okay. Yeah, and just my general opinion is I thought the presentation was great, and I completely support, you know, collaborations and saving money. So I thought it was great. Thank you.
Thank you.
John?
Saves us money, allows the law enforcement and our local citizens to not have to drive to Vancouver, gives us more local control over the courts. Good job, keep going.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor?
I think you've got your answers.
Okay.
Yes.
When you're talking about the people on probation, people that are found guilty and they have a 2-year probation, is that every single person that goes before the judge, no matter how small the misdemeanor is? I mean,
Let me ask your city attorney to address that.
Well, there are 2 types of probation, but typically, yes. Anybody that's pled guilty to a misdemeanor or gross misdemeanor, obviously not traffic infractions, will be put on probation. In fact, they will go in front of the judge and their sentence will be the maximum allowed by law, and then they will suspend whatever portion that they're not going to serve and only have to serve a portion. So if I go and commit a theft, shoplift at Weimart, and it's my first offense, I might have 1 day of work crew to do, but the judge will sentence me to 364 days in jail, and he'll suspend all but 1 day. And then he'll put me on probation for 2 years. And during that 2 years, the court can make sure that I do the work crew, and that I don't commit any further crimes. And if I do, then the court has authority, because you're on probation and you have a suspended sentence for 2 years, that the court will have authority to bring you back and add the suspended portion. He could take some of that out and assign that as something you'll have to serve. So everybody is put on probation.
so I was picturing maybe like TV, I don't know, probation officer, someone involved in that person's life, tracking them.
Well, there are 2 types of probations to think about. I was talking about bench probation, which is 99% of the cases. The 1% of the cases will be what we call the active probation, and I think the proposal would be that the city would not do the active probation. We would still contract with the county to provide that. Those are for the worst, the ones that really need some help in that active probation. A bench probation is merely, we're just going to make sure that you complete this list of tasks, and once you do that, we're not going to pay attention to you or your case unless you commit a new crime.
Wow, that's a lot.
That kind of leads back to, we talked, one of the points Larry made is, you know, the customer service thing, we're somewhat satisfied. You might ask the logical question, well, geez, why don't we just do that now? Well, when we try to work with some of the district court staff to do things maybe in a modified Kamis-Washougal way that works for us, we're often told, well, that's not the way we do it in Vancouver, and just for uniformity, we need to do things one way. And whenever things need to be done one way, they're always done the way that they work best for the entire district court, not for our little pocket out here at Kamis-Washougal. So if we had our own staff, we could go to our court manager, and our court manager could handle that program the way we want it done. So that's just where we have that minor component where we say we're somewhat satisfied with our customer service. We would like to specialize certain things like that and just to do things our way.
What about a juvenile court?
Juvenile court is much like the felony court. That is outside of the jurisdiction of a local district court. So our juveniles would still go to Clark County Juvenile Court for adjudication of their cases. No change there.
All right.
Well, I fear we've taken up more time than our 30 minutes, and I beg your forgiveness.
Even your short version, you got to an hour.
Thank you very much. And Larry, Lene passed out his cards, and we are more than welcome at any time to answer any of your questions. And so if you don't have anything else, we'll let you get on with the rest of your workshop. And I feel bad because I've delayed my former boss here. So.
Heck, he's not on until the end of the entire agenda, so. Chief Lackey, thank you very much. Larry, thank you for being here tonight and making the presentation. Chief Mitchell, thank you. Okay, from courts to dollars. Let's talk about some dollars. Jennifer, a 2011 fourth quarter update. I'm assuming fourth quarter and basically the year's update, correct?
Yes. Bear with me for just a moment.
Oh, God.
Mayor and Council. We've completed the preliminary numbers for both the fourth quarter and, of course, the year end for 2011, and wanted to share those with you tonight. So to start off with the big picture for the general and street funds, we're ending the year, the preliminary numbers are showing a surplus of $267,000 roughly. There are a few more refining journal entries that need to be performed, but that's a pretty close estimate at this point. That does include the expenses for the south side sidewalks that were part of the budget amendment for 2011, the pavement enhancement for East Street expenses, the police department enhancements that were approved in the budget supplemental, and then the Highway 14 conceptual redesign. All those costs were taken out before coming up with the surplus number. It does not include the reserve transfers. We backed those out since that was just moving the reserve from the general fund reserves into the designated transportation match capital project fund, the building capital fund, and then we actually seeded the ER&R fund at the beginning of 2011 versus starting it in 2010. And then we backed up the true up for the EMS fund 125, excuse me, the $281,000 that we needed to true up that restricted fund for. So those are not included in that number. To give a kind of a visual of the reserve fund for the general and streets. In 2010, we ended the year with roughly $1.7 million in reserve. That's the 16% council policy reserved amount. And then we had unrestricted reserves, kind of surplus savings in the general and street accounts, roughly $3 million. So during 2011 in the budget amendment, council chose to agree with what the staff had presented and kind of containing and moving some of those restricted or unrestricted reserves, excuse me, into different capital project funds, planning for the future. The Transportation Capital Fund is to provide match for different grant opportunities. CDBG, 2 CDBG loans were, or grants, not loans, sorry, that we applied for in 2012, so the match would come out of that capital fund. And then for the sidewalks in Addy, and then the building capital fund, the other CDBG grant would come, the match would come out of that fund. So it's planning for the future and to have that capacity. To kind of give a visual of, we spent reserves, we transferred reserves, but yet the ending number still grew. That's why I put in the ER&R contribution, the Transportation Capital Fund, and the Building Capital Fund to show that 2010 ended with 4.7 in reserves, and then we're estimating 4.9 when you add that all back together with the transfers. I'm sure that's as clear as mud. If you have questions, I'll be glad to answer those. If not, we'll move on to revenues. Our revenues did much better than projected. We actually collected 108, almost 109% of property taxes. Sales and utility taxes were over 100% collected. And then Mitch's department was the big winner with 189% of the budget in the development revenue section. And that was an additional $22,000 higher than the 2010 revenues for that same area. And then again, the investment earnings are higher due to the long-term, quasi-long-term investing that we've done with the reserve amounts. And then our pretty graph that you can probably see. This one's not too bad. Just to compare fourth quarter this year to fourth quarter, or 2010 actuals actually, since we're at year end, and just kind of gave some comments on the side on to why they're different. But you can see that we did pretty well this year. We did move the cable franchise fees. They were reported in one line item in 10, and then Paul Lewis assisted us with how we were reporting those and put that they should be in a different line item. So that's why some of the line items are skewed a little bit. But we tried to make notes as we went along. But overall, pretty good here. And keep going. 2011 expenditures came in under budget as a whole. So we came in at roughly 92.6% of the budget. Most departments came in under budget, which was great. Definitely helped with that bottom line. And then our 2011 expenses were right in line with 2010. For visual, for the general and street funds. The voter registration costs for the council, you'll see the council came in pretty low at 59% last year, and that's due to the costs of the elections last year actually didn't come in time to hit the 13th month to get them into the proper year, so they were expended this year. So your expenses will be higher this year. And the administrator is higher, obviously, because we had a full-time administrator for 11, whereas 10, it was only half the year. But other than that, departments came in pretty much right where we had anticipated. And then bottom line, general street fund was under budget. Okay. As for the utility funds, they're tracking as according to the rate study that was put together. If you'll remember, FCS came and presented that, and the rate analysis dictated us spreading across the line. So some years would be a better collection rate, and then other years would be lower to keep that rate increase bearable across the line so that we wouldn't have huge spikes. So that's why you'll see that the revenues were more than 100% collected to the budget. And then expenses for water sewer came in and almost right on track, and then stormwater was a little under budget. For visual for the utility funds, you can see we're tracking right along according to plan, according to the capital plan as well. And then this is the spreadsheet I always laugh at, is what Dave said. So I was presenting it to him, and this is all the funds across the line. Again, the general and street fund comes in at the surplus between revenues and expenses. You'll see a couple of negative numbers in the fourth quarter preliminary numbers, and that's programmed budget expenses. For the two REIT funds, you'll see that they're slightly over budget, and that was due to the debt schedules. They called some of the bonds, which we weren't anticipating, so that's why the difference is there. We had the money, and debt is okay to pay down, but that's why those numbers are so big in the 57 and the 152. The $394,000 deficit for transportation was East Street. That was also budgeted as part of the project, so that was expected. Same with 406 for the water sewer construction reserve account. That's budgeted for the projects that we were completing during the year. But overall, we did pretty much right on target. Okay, local government investment pool, give you an update on our investments. You can see the whopping percentages that we're earning in our local government investment pool. They're very liquid. We can request the money to come out same day if we need to. As you can see, the interest rates reflect the liquidity of them. To show you what we earned, this is citywide across all funds, roughly $15,000 in interest for the year in the LGIP. And then the bonds that I was talking about, the long-term investments that we put together with different funds, I broke that out for you. The general fund earned roughly $30,000 in interest with these bonds this year. The other funds for the 610 and the 604, some of the smaller funds amounts, earned roughly $5,000. And then the water sewer bond funds that we invested that were targeted to be used in 12 and 13 as part of the revenue bond that we issued earned $51,000. So those are doing better. They are getting called as the economy is staying pretty low with investment interest. The higher rated bonds, if they were callable, are being called. So we're getting the benefit of the gains on those, but then we have to reinvest it at a lower amount, which hurts a little bit, but we do get the initial upfront extra money, I guess, on the bond being called. So that's it.
Great job.
Comments?
It was, we knew coming into the end of the year that we were likely to be in a fortunate position again, but to finally get the final numbers is nice to see. One of the things I want to make sure and point out for council, with our expenses specifically coming in at 92–93% of what the budget was, basically department heads and line staff held expenses down 7% from where we thought we were going to spend. That's on top of, in 2010, we cut budgets by 10%. We then tried to come another 3% under, and we reduced their budgets this year going into the budget year itself. So overall, in the last 2 years, we're close to or just a little over 20% of reduction of where we were 2 years ago just in expenses. And at the same time, trying to do everything we can to become more efficient and manage those revenues to stay in the checking account and not get paid back out on the other side. So contrary to what some folks may believe, we at least are one government that isn't trying to spend every single dollar that we get in the door. So questions from council, comments? Paul?
I just wanted to make one comment. I know that what you meant is longer term in terms of the bonds, but I want to point out that the maximum term of any of these bonds was 3 years, and that anybody who is in the bond business is going to call that a short-term bond. Maybe at 3 years you start to call them intermediate, kind of 3 to 7 is intermediate, but these are not long-term interest plays at all.
Other comments? Dave?
I like the way, excuse me, I like the way you did the accounting where you took out the transfers from reserves and then came up with a figure. I think that's great. Also, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to compliment you on a great job of managing the resources of the city this year.
Thank you.
I've been focused on that issue. You and I have not always agreed, but it appears to me you've done a great job this year.
Thank you. 99.9% of that goes back to the staff. They're the ones that are finding better ways to do things, so.
I know, but you hired them.
I only hired few. Other comments, questions? Jennifer, thank you very much. Thank you to all your staff for pulling all those numbers together for us.
Thank you. I will pass that along.
Okay. Moving on to Public Works. Jim, you've got 6 items before us this evening.
Yes, Your Honor, I'll try to be brief here.
Not a worry. First one up, professional services agreement with J.J. Kane Auctioneers. We're going to make some more money.
Yes, as you said, this is a contract with J.J. Auctioneers, and I'm just going to briefly go through why we are looking at them to auction some of our equipment. Basically, we're looking at more of a targeted audience or targeted buyers for our surplus equipment. And like the mayor said, we expect to get a few more dollars out of each piece of equipment that we do sell. We sold a Camel vac truck. Boy, it must have been 3 or 4 years ago for about $50, and that was at our surplus sale down at operations. And just the salvage value on that truck was probably more like, $1,500 to $2,000. So we didn't get what we thought we should get out of that vehicle. We're not locked in this contract. This is optional. If we do decide to sell a piece of equipment through them, then there is a commission, but we're not locked into anything over time. We can go with them or we can sell with somebody else. Like I say, this is lower cost than past practice. We had the surplus sales down at operations, and typically we'd attract a small crowd, maybe 50 or so people from the public to come look at different items. But we had somebody from finance down there taking money, and then a couple public works people down there as well on overtime. So we think this is going to lower our cost to sell this equipment. And like I say, national exposure, so this is on the internet, and they do have a local drop-off site in Portland, so it's fairly close. Just want to show you real quick some of the vehicles that we're talking about. Jennifer mentioned the ER&R fund, and here's what we have down there right now, obviously fully depreciated. This 1978 Ford pickup, Old Yeller. I think Trevor Evers actually got his CDL in this vehicle at one time. And then a couple more pickup trucks that we have. This is a 92. and then 1996 Ford, and this is about 16 years old. So this will definitely improve our auctioning process. And with that, I'd just like to open it up for any questions.
Council? Jennifer?
Okay. Jim,
Yes.
you were saying that it's not a contract for a specific amount of time. I mean, I wasn't sure because I saw the 5-year time frame in the agreement.
Right.
So, but it's not exclusive. Maybe that's what you were getting
It's
at.
not exclusive. We can sell our vehicles any way we choose if we sign this contract. It doesn't mean that we have to go through JJ Auctioneers. So that's all I meant by that. As far as a specific time frame, yeah, it's set up that we can do this over 5 years if we choose, in any given year, if we have a piece of equipment that we want to sell with them.
Right. So we're looking at how many pieces of equipment to start out with?
We have 3 here right now. We might have another 2 or 3 that we'll put up for sale. We have about 70 vehicles in our fleet.
Okay.
So,
It's more than I thought. Okay, great.
Is
Is it-
mowers and things like that
Right,
as
right.
well.
Oh, okay, so.
But like I say, this is a targeted audience, so we'll be
Right.
looking at different, agencies, counties, and so if somebody has a specific need, they'll be able to find it on their site.
Okay. So are there other cities that use this company?
Yeah, actually, I don't have all, I'm thinking Vancouver does to a certain extent, but I know the county uses them as well.
Okay, okay. Let's see. There's something in here about reimbursed expenses and about
Right.
approving them, if you can kind of go over that a little bit.
Yeah, there's a cutoff there. Are you looking under number 8, commission? Or,
Yeah, that one, yeah. And then number 10, reimbursed expenses.
okay, so I'll start off with,
You can talk about the commission, because that was another question I had. Go ahead.
okay. So the 10% fee is to the buyer for each item sold. So that's not a fee that we incur. And then, like I say, if co-assignments totaling greater than $5,000, then it's at 5%. And then if it's $2,500 to $5,000, it's 10%.
Okay, so but that's the sellers. Okay, that's
The
us.
buyer.
No. Okay, the seller agrees, the auctioneer, okay.
Right, those are the consignment fees that we would pay.
Okay,
So,
right.
and then you had a question on number 10.
I did. That was just, the auctioneer may deduct exact costs for additional services, and then there's 7
Right.
listed additional, like truck washing and repairs and transportation of the items and just all
Right.
kinds of different little charges.
Right, and generally speaking, these are things that we're gonna do before we take it over there. We're gonna get it cleaned up, we're gonna maybe throw a little paint on it, something like that, to get it sold at top dollar if we can. This is also pre-approved, so all of these miscellaneous items are pre-approved through us before they can actually charge us.
Okay,
So
good.
they have to give us a
Yes.
call and say, hey, we
That's
wanna
important.
charge you for these items, this truck is
Right.
dirty, we gotta
Small-
wash it.
The fine print, so to
Right,
speak,
right.
that concerns me a little bit. Because I know we're pretty good at keeping our vehicles repaired and in working order and all of that sort of thing.
But like I say, all of these reimbursed expenses will be pre-approved.
Okay. And since this is not something I know a whole lot about, this power of attorney, that just makes me a little nervous. If you could just talk about that a little bit, is that common?
Where'd Scott go? I think he took off already, but yeah, power of attorney. We actually ran this through, generally these contracts will move forward through English Lane Marshall for review, and we did that with this one too. I don't know if I can speak specifically to power of attorney. I'm not an expert either in that area, but we did run this through the attorney's office. If that gives you any.
Okay. I mean, I didn't even realize the city could grant the power of attorney to.
Well, I think in this
auctioneer.
case, once they receive title, and I think
Right.
there's certain things that they have to do, with the vehicle. I mean, that would be just off the top of my head.
Okay. Paul?
Just real quickly, it's in the normal course of business, anytime you sell a motor vehicle, and there's a broker involved, the broker has a limited power of attorney to do the transaction. Otherwise, you may have a chain where you in effect transfer the vehicle through 5 or 6 parties, and rather than paying sales tax at each and every step, you have a power of attorney to sign the transfer of title. And that's common not only for cities, but anytime you're selling a vehicle through a titled, anything that's titled through a broker. And then just one question, Jim, do I understand correctly that if we chose to take any item at all, that we could put it on eBay if we wanted to, that we're not at all limited to them?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
This agreement only covers those items that we choose as a city to send over to
Right.
JJ to sell through their auctioneering services. We can do anything we want with them, including sending it to them, and this just gives us a 5-year ability to do that.
Thank you.
Other questions? Okay, moving on to item number 2, professional services agreement with Berger ABAM for environmental assessment on Shepherd Road.
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. We actually spoke about this last week, if you recall, in executive session. And so tonight I'll just go through it briefly again. These are improvements to a property that we're actually considering these improvements for parking for the Sandy swimming hole. And I'm sure all of you are familiar with that situation down there in the summertime where we get the public parking on both sides of the street, and it becomes a real safety issue. It would be for overflow parking. There's about 23 stalls that we think that we can add. We have 18 there now at Sandy Swimming Hole, and we could probably add another couple at Sandy Swimming Hole if we reconfigured that as well. The conceptual will include a play area, some trash cans, maybe a picnic table, something like that. So it would be for year-round use instead of just seasonal. And this is part of our comprehensive plan. And it's a perfect location right across the street from Sandy Swimming Hole. And if we do secure this site, we'll have a better chance of maybe securing some funding to build it, although we can use PIF funds, park impact fees. So here's the location here off of Shepherd Road, right across from Sandy Swimming Hole. Existing conditions, just a couple photographs here of the road there, and there's really limited parking along that area. And we do have a lot of safety concerns in the area. And here's a shot of the site itself. This is looking across from the south from Sandy Swimming Hole. And so Berger ABAM, they're going to conduct a property assessment for us if it's the council's desire. And really this is just due diligence on our part if we're going to expend public funds on this property. We want to make sure that we're able to make the improvements necessary to the property. So they're going to review geotechnical reports, federal, state, local, tribal data, regulatory listed sites, under Endangered Species Act, things like that, hazardous substances, historical property data, and review USGS as well. So they'll look at, soil conditions and, floodplains and things like that. And this is kind of a conceptual of what the parking facility will look like. And then with that, we budgeted in 2012 $250,000 in our park impact fees. for this, and we're thinking that the land acquisition will be approximately $160,000. Comparables for the property came in at $175,000, and so we're thinking the improvements will be around $60,000 to $90,000, and total estimated would be around $220,000. So with that, just like to open it up for any questions you may have.
Council? Looks like you're good on that one, Jim.
Fantastic.
Item number 3, professional services agreement with Wallace Engineering for pump stations 2 and 3 upgrades.
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. These are, let me get this slideshow here. So we're going to just talk a little bit about the pump station 2 and 3 improvements. This is actually in the design phase, so I don't want anybody to get the wrong impression that we're going to build this year, but we may start on that this year and go into 2014. This is on our facility plan as well. But just wanted to answer those questions, where, what, and why. We don't want to just make improvements unless they're necessary. So this is where each pump station is located. Pump station 2 over there off of 6th and K Street, fairly close to the Washougal River there. And then pump station 3 is over there off of 32nd Street and 4 down there in the port. And you can see it's close proximity to Campen Creek there. So these are Smith and Lovelace wet wells, and they were built in 1960. Smith and Lovelace was the premier manufacturer of these wet wells back in the day, and they still do a pretty good amount of business constructing these. These are wastewater pumps, and they force the waste in what's called a force main. So they pump it to the force main and then to a gravity line, and then the gravity line will take it all the way to the sewer treatment plant. So if you remember back that first map from pump station number 2, you can see there's quite a distance from pump station 2 all the way to the treatment plant. So improvements were originally bid in 2006 and were found to be cost prohibitive. So at that time, we actually had another station very similar to these two, and we did station number 1. It's over there by the fire station. So we did improve station 1, but at that time the bids came in substantially higher than we thought, and so we were not able to catch pump station 2 and 3 at that time. So this is existing condition, and this is what we're dealing with. This is one of our staff looking down into the station. This requires a confined space entry, different things like that to get in here. So the access is limited, and it is quite a bit more staff time accessing these. Here's an old panel, and this is existing condition at number 3. So why are these rehabilitations needed? Both of these stations have reached the end of their useful life, and we're looking at 52 years. There's significant maintenance, 3 times the labor of other lift stations, so we're out there quite a bit looking at these. Confined space entry, and that's really one of the reasons of why. An updated lift station will have submersible pumps, so you can just pull the pump right up out of there and work on it, and they'll have the control panel up top and everything else. And there is a risk of untreated sewage releases, and we actually had a 50,000 gallon release in 06 from that number 1 station that I was telling you about earlier. So we did have a release, and if that happens, obviously we have to report that to ecology, and it becomes a big costly endeavor to get it repaired. As you can see, looking down that hole, I mean, that whole thing fills up, and there's really no access to get down in there, so you have to pump from the top, and it's not an easy repair. So with that, any questions?
Joyce?
If the cost was prohibitive in 2006, do you have those figures? And when are you proposing this happen? And what are the projected costs now?
So I caught the last end of your question. I'm sorry, Councilmember Lindsay, but projected costs are $1,172,000. We actually have a Public Works Trust Fund loan, and this was originally, Pump Station 2 and 3 upgrades were originally going to be included in our revenue bond, and we're taking some other projects out in the future and moving those forward to the revenue bond, and we're going to pay for these with a Public Works Trust Fund loan because it's about a 1% interest rate, so it's a very, very attractive loan option for us. And I'm sorry, I missed your other question.
I just wondered what the costs were in 2006. Is it more expensive now?
I would assume that it would be more expensive. I don't have the costs from '06 in front of me at this time, but I would assume that that would be the case.
Thank you.
Other questions, Council? Okay. Moving on to item number 4, supplemental professional services agreement with FCS for comprehensive water plan financial review.
Yes, this is part of our water system plan, and this is the financial piece of the water system plan. So when you have a water system plan and you have capital improvements, there is that requirement to add the financial piece. You know, if you're going to look out into the future, you know, you have to put in place a funding mechanism to build the facilities that you need to out into the future. So that's really what this is about. FCS, Financial Consulting Service, did some work on the rate study with us, all of you might recall. There were actually some of these items that we used as part of our MSA contract, and that was Murray Smith and Associates. They're the ones that are developing our water system plan. So a portion of the work you can see in the scope is actually the, you know, it has task 0 there. Some of this stuff is already being worked on. So that's what task 0 means. But they'll look at everything from capital facility charges and you know, look at a financial plan up to the 5-year and the 20-year to make this happen. So that's what this is. This is a requirement. Department of Health requires us to update our water system plan, just like most of our planning documents, and this is a piece of that FCS will be working on. Any questions about? Paul?
Not exactly related to this, but are we any closer to cost of service on utilities? You know what I mean by that, or no?
Yes, I do.
Yes, kind of. We have not scoped FCS to do a full cost of service analysis for us. We had talked about them doing that. What we have done is to be responsive to the specific components of that the council was interested in, namely the low-income piece. We'll be back to council here. I can't remember exactly the day, but it's coming up in the next month or so in a workshop where we'll have a recommended program for that. The rest of that gets into a fundamental shift and complete overhaul in how we charge both users and connectors to the system. And it was our thought that we would bring that type of wholesale and fundamental change to the council as we get closer to the end of the 5-year period and implement that, if it is appropriate, in in an overall overhaul and then update to that. We're already now almost a year and a half into that 5 years. That study will take quite some time. That made the most sense to us given our resources. However, some of the key pieces to that, the smaller pieces, we are advancing pursuant to your specific direction at our last retreat, for example.
It's certainly not an emergency. It's not even urgent, but I am concerned that unless we know what it actually costs to provide water to various classes of users, that some users are subsidizing the others, and that's a concern.
Absolutely.
And I can speak a little bit to that. You know, when we talk about system development charges, part of our planning, you know, moving forward, and some of the planning documents, FCS will be looking at that, at least on the water side, and in our general sewer plan as well. Those financial pieces are included in there. One thing that we are looking at as well is low income. I know council recommended that we look into low income rates, and we are doing that, and we should have something together real soon on that. And I know Jennifer is working at looking at the utilities as a whole, and you know how the rates are progressing, and the capital facilities that we're building. You know, if we build, off the top of my head, the storage building at the treatment plant came in over a little bit, but most of the other ones have come in under. So we're constantly looking at it and constantly reviewing and seeing if there's any type of adjustment that we can make. But Jennifer would have a little bit more detail on some of that.
Yeah, as I said, my concern is that is really at both ends of the consumption scale, that one might be subsidizing the other.
Other questions for Jim on the FCS agreement? Okay, municipal stormwater capacity grant.
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. Boy, it must have been about a month ago. I don't have the exact date off the top of my head, but we had talked about OTAC engineering and performing some of our stormwater management program evaluation so that we could maintain our compliance with our stormwater permit. And we brought that before the council, and I mentioned at that time that we would be able to possibly utilize a grant from Department of Ecology for their services, and it would pay for at least partial part of their services, or actually it would pay all of those services, and then we would have some funding left over. This is actually a $50,000 grant from Department of Ecology, and there is no match required. So this will help us with that OTAC engineering and some of our compliance issues. We may be able to use this more liberally than we originally thought. We may be able to purchase equipment and things of that nature, even maybe get some design for some of our projects that we need to get accomplished. Maybe J Street culverts over there by the golf course, where we have a lot of the flooding that occurs every other year. So those are some of the things that we're going to look into. Are there any questions on this grant from Department of Ecology? Yes.
Yep. Wow. Seem to be getting a lot for $50,000. I'm just wondering, looking over this and the onerous requirements of this grant and working with DOE for this, is it really worth it? I mean, I'm just... Definitely. Are you sure?
Yeah, definitely. This is
to
very...
To me, it's like making a deal with the devil for $50,000.
Yeah, we received a grant, actually 3 grants. We received one initially from Department of Ecology, the same type of grant. And then we received one here a couple years back where we purchased our vac truck with the money, or at least partially with the money. But the reporting is, the reporting is onerous, but I think we have it down to a point where it's not so bad now. So, and then there is a final report that's due. But yeah, there's always the program requirements, as you move forward with these grants. But I think it's well worth it. I think we're going to get a lot done with that $50,000. And stormwater is one of those issues that just gets more difficult and more difficult as time goes by. So we really need, sometimes the experts to come in to make sure that we're in compliance with our permit. Or we run into a situation like the county has recently. So.
Right, definitely. Oh, no. I'm not saying we don't need to do everything we can to, be able to retain our permits. Obviously, I know that that's a necessity. We're a phase 2 city now, so it's just the auditing and the progress reports and the forms and the follow-ups, and just know that's going to be a lot to keep up with. So, but if you think it's worth it, I'll support you.
Other questions from council? Joe?
Do you have a projection of costs on that repair that's needed on J Street?
I do. I don't have it in front of me right now, but that might help us out with a portion of that. It wouldn't help us out with the whole thing. Maybe, some permitting or some design requirements. There's multitude of things that we could use this money for.
That's a tough one. Do we have any other areas in the city that flood like that, in residential areas, or that would affect buildings?
Well, we do have on North O with the Washougal River. There's an area down there that once in a while the Washougal River will flood, and that's actually it's a little bit worse situation. There has been property damage there frequently. So.
Other questions? Okay, moving
And just,
along.
Connie, Joe, if you want to see that, it floods in my backyard
What time's dinner?
tomorrow.
Okay, item number 6, resolution on E-Verify.
So on December 7th, 2009, the council submitted Agenda Bill 287-9. I'm just kind of reading from the summary statement here just to refresh everybody's memory. Resolution for the city to require the use of E-Verify by all businesses entering into a contract with the city. So recently, council asked to do away with the $100,000 limit and effectively lower this to $0. And so the resolution is here. This has been looked at by legal, and our recommended action is to read the title by title only and post the resolution in a usual manner. I think I'd just like to add that it's not really going to affect us, particularly in public works. We have an interlocal agreement with the city of Vancouver right now, and we go off of their small works roster. And currently, all the members on that small works roster are at a $0 amount, or there is the requirement for all of them to register with E-Verify. With that, any questions? I think E-Verify has been discussed frequently, so.
So Jim, the only real change in this from the previous resolution that was passed is taking the 100,000 to 0. All the rest of the verbiage is the same.
That's correct.
Dave?
And I must not have caught this last time, but in section 1, it says, "It is the purpose and intent of the city council to ensure." Should that not be the city?
No, it's our resolution.
No?
No?
It would be yours.
It's our resolution, ordinance.
Okay, thank you.
We just carry out your intent, so the city ends up in there no matter what.
Got you, thank you.
Any other questions? Anything else for Jim? Okay, we're through there. Community development.
Thank you, Your Honor. We have, council, we have 2 items on the consent agenda for next Monday, and these are on the consent agenda to set the public hearing for the development agreements for the Hamilton property and for the Port Camas-Washougal property on 6th Street. The items, or the consent agenda, would set the hearing for March 19th, and we will be back to City Council on the March 12th for work session to discuss the items in detail. So the recommended actions for both is to set the public hearing for March 19th, 2012 at 6 p.m. Any questions related to that?
Questions on either one?
I have a question, but I don't know that it's appropriate for this. It's just basically asking you about shoreline and the protection thereof.
Okay.
So I don't know if this is an appropriate venue or if that's something we should talk about in Shoreline Review Committee or.
It's your meeting.
Well, it's important, I believe, that we preserve open space for people to be able to walk and to have access to the shore through this piece of property in particular. I know that those kind of things have been discussed and worked on between the entities, but I just want to voice, a desire to see that so that we have connectivity between the port and also all the way through to Catherine Clark Park. Thank you.
And if we're just real quick, I mean, that has been the intent of the parties, all the parties involved in the city in particular, and looking at that. The shoreline ordinance now, makes some requirements for access to the water, but this development agreement, or these development agreements in and of themselves, are really just vesting the standards in place right now. I think later when we get more involved and get a plan on the, a more concrete plan, if you will, that's when you'll see a development agreement, either amendment to the one that we're working on, or a new one that really gets at that protection of that trail system for the city. But that has been, as far as staff has been concerned, that has been first and foremost on ours.
Thank you.
I would just add that the Port Commission has made a very public commitment to exactly the kind of access that you're talking about.
Absolutely.
Okay. Other questions in regards to setting the hearings? Okay. Thank you, Mitch. On to some economic development. David, the interlocal agreement with Port of Camas-Washougal and the City of Camas.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Also joining us tonight is Paul Dennis, who's the President and CEO of the Camas-Washougal Economic Development Association. I believe he'll give a brief update. But before Paul addresses you with his update, I'll just very briefly go over these 2 items that are on your agenda, and then we can receive an update from our association. As you'll recall, last summer we entered into an interlocal agreement with the City of Camas and with the Port of Camas-Washougal to create an economic development association that came to be known as the Camas-Washougal Economic Development Association. And that interlocal agreement really was a startup agreement. It was intended to, and served the purpose well, of getting that organization started. And it set up the port as the primary or the principal entity in that relationship, and they became a provider of economic development services for the City of Camas and the City of Washougal, if you would. The port retained the services of an executive director or president and CEO. That interlocal agreement has outlived its usefulness now because it was designed as the startup agreement. And so the agreement before you essentially takes us to the next stage, which is we are now maintaining a Camas-Washougal Economic Development Association. And so it's a very straightforward agreement that has the same duration as the prior agreement through the end of 2013, the same separation language. It points to the fact that we will enter into professional services agreements individually, all 3 of us, with the association, as opposed to working through the port. We will each have a relationship with the association. We would make payments to the association as opposed to the port. And so that takes me to the next item, which is a professional services agreement with the Camas-Washougal Economic Development Association, specifically to do that. These documents work in tandem. It's an identical document to what the port and the city of Camas will be doing, obviously changing the names. The financial commitment is articulated in the interlocal agreement that was approved in the budget again in 2012 for $50,000 maximum from each of the two cities and $100,000 for the port. And in your Dropbox, in your folder, just today finalized the Exhibit A, which is the performance measures. The board of the Camas-Washougal Economic Development Association gave their approval to that just this past Thursday at their board meeting, and so then we were able to present that. And also in your folder, your Dropbox folder, is a background memo that Paul produced that provides a summary of all of the research that was done and analysis that was done to arrive at what the board ultimately approved. So those are available to you in your on your iPads. Exhibit A is part and parcel with the professional services agreement, and the memo is background information. It's not officially part of either of those documents. And so our recommendation for both of these is to authorize the mayor to sign the interlocal agreement as well as the professional services agreement. I don't know if we should pause for any questions on these two documents or maybe get the full update and then.
David, we only have one document, just Exhibit A. We have two Exhibit A's in here.
Oh.
So.
Let me.
I can't open the Doc M document for some reason.
The Doc M won't open, but the Doc will.
But I do have a question on Exhibit A, if I can go ahead and proceed while you're working on that.
Sure.
It says here, and maybe this is better for Paul to answer, 5-year positive jobs balance of creating and retaining 1,400 jobs. Just out of curiosity, how would you calculate retaining a job? What's the formula you would use for that?
Excuse me, I'm just getting over a cold. That's a great question. So how would we account for a retained job? And so when we're going to produce our annual report and we're going to describe the activities of CWEDA, one of the things we'll be looking at is profiling is the companies that we've been, that we call our clients. So the ones that we've been providing assistance. So CID Bioscience is a great example of a company that we were able to retain within the community. And so we would count the fact that we were able to retain those 15 jobs. They also are adding a couple extra jobs, and so there's some growth there. So we'd try to keep track of them kind of in separate columns. So that's what we'd call a retained job. If it's just someone that decided to stay in the Camas-Washougal area and we didn't provide any assistance to, we wouldn't count it.
So you're saying that basically if it's a company who's thinking of maybe moving,
exactly,
and they're part of your group or part of what's going on, and you basically talk them into staying.
Exactly.
That'll be retainment.
With CID, they really wanted to stay. They knew the site they wanted to go in. They had some hurdles to jump through, and they weren't quite sure how to get through the process when it came down to closing. One of the issues they ran into is there was a heating oil tank on site. It was removed, and no one ever got the certificates from the state. And so that deal almost crashed. Was able to kind of talk through the parties to try to keep calmer heads and get an extension on that. And they were able to go back through, hire a consultant, do the probing, and show that the soil wasn't contaminated. So.
Okay, great, thank you.
We also have a Camas company that I think through their consolidation and need to relocate to a new site actually won't stay in Camas. Will probably end up in Washougal just because of availability of property and their requirements. So that's one where we'd count as retained for both communities. We're not going to try to double count what's happening in Camas versus Washougal.
Okay, thank you.
Council, just to clarify administratively, in the folder, Rose removed one of the two Exhibit A's, so I'm looking now, and you should see an Exhibit A, CUITA PSA.doc, and that's openable, and that is the one-page Exhibit A. And then also you should see a PDF, and it's titled Performance Measures Final Draft.pdf, and that is the background memo. And if you still have further trouble with that, we can help you out after the meeting.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Steve?
As Mr. Dennis and I have discussed before, I've got two concerns here. One is that we measure outcomes, and I rely on his background in econometrics to guide us in that. And I think he's done a good job so far. The other one is that we not be so stringent in our evaluation that nobody can meet the standards. So I haven't had a chance to review this thing yet in detail. I'd like to do that. And if I might give you a call to discuss it with you. Thanks very much.
Touch on that just a little bit. And it'll become a little bit more clear once you read the memo. That was one of the board's concerns, was making sure that we had measures that meant something. So we have outcomes that speak to what CUITA's activity is doing. One of those, in doing that, we don't want to set a bar so high, and let's say we want to try to attract 2,000 jobs, and then all of a sudden we get the worst recession that's ever hit the United States or the world. How are you going to achieve that when you just set that as your benchmark? And so one of the things that you'll discover in the background memo is a discussion about how are we doing in terms of our ability to maintain jobs here or grow our job base relative to the rest of the jurisdictions in Clark County, to the metro area, to the state, and the nation. And in there, we've got a graph that shows what's happened in both cities. We'll keep track of it for both cities, but also really report more on the aggregate, because we truly believe that you really need to look at the Kamas-Washougal area as a whole, but we'll be able to kind of parse those out individually.
So you've got a context in which we're operating.
Exactly. Really the only measure that we have that we can get down to that specificity is employment. And you'll see in there that we're able to track employment from 1990 each year all the way to 2010. We're still a couple months out before we get to 2011 numbers. Once we get those, we'll update and probably have that stuff available on our website, so it'll be done probably in a couple months. But that's just one way of being able to keep check on if everybody else is losing 15% of their job base and we're only losing 6%, we're probably doing something right. And so we want to be able to have goals, be able to describe our activities from an economic and a benchmark standpoint, but we also want to be able to say, how are we doing relative to everyone else?
Yeah. And your goals are your concern. My concerns are the outcomes.
Right.
Okay, Joe?
I heard you call it CUITA. It's been funny that people have discussed the actual name, so that's official.
Yeah, it's
It's CUITA with a hard k, the hard C sound versus the soft C.
You always got to tease folks in Kamas versus Washougal, and one of the things early on that people kept asking me is it SWETA or CUITA? And so I would just tease them, it depends on which jurisdiction you live in.
Okay, what are we? We must be the CUITA, huh?
Yeah.
But Kamas is SWETA.
SWETA, right.
Oh,
Go figure.
boy, that competition's tough.
But
Oh,
yeah,
I'm an old phonics, I'm not an old phonics teacher. I'm a teacher of phonics in my past. So little things like that bother me, that just among our group, we didn't know what to call it. So I thought I would ask, and then I see what you're doing.
So we did, we were able to hire two firms, one that does our branding and our marketing, and they came up with the logo, came up with a lot of the branding materials that our website design firm is doing, being able to go out and get business cards. The firm Black Ops we hired to do our marketing and our branding, and they have extensive background and experience working with Nike, working with Smithsonian's. They had just a tremendous amount of background that we just couldn't get anywhere else, and for a price that probably pre-recession we wouldn't have been able to afford them. I think all said and done, by the time we're done with materials, the branding, the marketing, and the website development, will be under $14,000. Our high bid for the whole project was $30,000. So we had two companies that came in roughly about the same. We ended up just splitting the contract and playing to each other's strengths. So we have Workshed, residents that live here in Washougal. They've cited their business in Camas. They're doing our website development as we speak.
Thank you.
That discussion reminds me of a rollout that we did for a alcohol company a couple of years ago. You say potato, I say vodka. There are some of those things that just are never going to happen either way.
But this is a kindergarten foundational thing, so we will leave that vodka
Leave
off.
the vodka out. Other questions from council? Paul, did you have more of an update that you wanted to do as well?
Give at least a brief update. You know, it's been basically 8 months since we lifted it off the ground. In that 8 months period of time, we actually have formally formed the Camas Washougal Economic Development Association. We have adopted bylaws. We have a foundation for some performance measures now. We've done some give and take. We've actually looked at what other economic development associations are doing to try to get a sense of where we might want to slot ourselves in terms of setting up our own benchmarks. Along with that, we've been participating in planning for both cities. For the port, what plans might be done at the Hamilton lumber site, for example. We've been doing business development, and one of the first companies I was able to sit down with was the Sapphire Materials company here in Washougal, the old St. Gobain Union Carbide site. And the first meeting I was actually brought into, there was a foreign company that was looking to co-locate on site. It wasn't a match business-wise, so they didn't happen, but through that, we were able to develop relationships and through that, be able to help them bring on 2 new machines. And so they've not only cleaned up the site this last year, they've actually brought in 2 new state-of-the-art crystal sapphire growing machines. This last month, they actually did their first crystal buhl. They sent us a picture. It's pretty cool, pretty amazing. To think that they're taking alumina, melting it down, and making these crystals that basically their primary market for that is LED lighting. Which brings us to, we're actually working with an LED lighting company, a startup company. They're getting very close. They've already found the site they want, and so now they're working through the state to make sure they make use of the sales tax exemptions for equipment and building, and then they'll start both pulling building permits. On the planning side, also trying to work with both staffs on trying to come up with some incentives. In the case of Camas, next meeting, they'll actually have their first set of incentives, which will reduce their system development charges for water and sewer. What it looks like right now is they'll reduce the sewer SDC roughly by 50%, and then they'll reduce the water by about 60%. They're going to try it for 18 months, see what happens. It's a way of incenting some of their larger companies that have indicated they'd like to make that next investment. If you might recall, a few months ago, Linear Technologies was in the Columbian saying they might try to double their size, actually do a site expansion, by reducing the SEC since they are a heavy utility user. That actually would help create a substantial incentive for them. The other incentive they're looking at right now is the transportation impact fee reduction. And so they're looking at the formula, looking at what they might try to get for low interest loans and grants, and how does that translate into being able to pass that savings on to local companies that want to expand or grow here. So working on that, we're working with companies that range from R&D to LED lighting to biotechnology to just your basic manufacturing. And when we're going around doing a lot of these site visits with local companies, that's where we're generating a lot of our leads. Most of them, if not all of them, are healthy. It's safe to say all of them are much healthier than they were in 2009, especially winter of 2009. And many of them are contemplating small to large size expansions. We've had a number of employers add workforce, and when we know that an employer is looking at adding workforce or coming into the area and they need workers, there are grant dollars available to help offset if they hire workers that were basically dislocated from their job. So a job that's gone somewhere else that won't come back here. And there's some regional grant dollars that have been made available through the Portland metro area. And so we're working with Greater Portland Inc. to try to secure some of those dollars for our local employers. So It runs the whole gamut. We've got everything from retaining employers to employers expanding to citing new companies. We've got a couple companies looking from as far down as San Diego to as close as Portland area coming over here. So it's a pretty exciting time. Business looks like it's doing well. Looks like the economy probably bottomed out in 2010. I wouldn't say that we're going to have a quick recovery, and that recovery will happen differently in each jurisdiction. I think it's safe to say if you gauge building activity, if you gauge what's happening in the school districts, all those measures are trending upwards. And so I think what we're looking at is a very positive environment. We just want to help foster that and make that happen that much faster.
And you're getting some press.
We're getting great press. Last week, I spent last Monday afternoon with Bloomberg News, taking them around for a couple hours. What drew them here was Fisher Investments, and so they're going to do an article on Fisher, but they also want to do one on the broader Camas-Washougal area. We've had articles up in the Seattle Times. I can't understand why we're doing so well. So we're getting a lot of positive press. We want to try to leverage that to land more companies and so forth. CRDC is going to be doing some workshops in March, April, and May. I'll be the speaker at the April one. We're talking about international finance, and my topic in particular will be what's called EB-5 financing, which basically is legal immigration, where if you want to immigrate and get a citizenship here, if you invest dollars, you can actually get your green card much quicker than going through the regular process. And so there are a lot of communities and there are a lot of companies that are actually going over to foreign places like China where there are investment dollars to be had and bringing them back over here. For example, the 520 bridge in Seattle, about 60 million of that is paid for through EB-5 funding. So, but I think that's really, if we come down to barriers for companies, one is the environmental regulations. It used to be wetlands, but it's increasingly becoming, stormwater is becoming a major, just a major problem. We will be working, hopefully, with the port to try to create a kind of a regional type plug-and-play system. And so we're going to explore that this next month to see if we want to all play together in that game. The other is financing, and it's still very difficult to get dollars. A number of the companies we're dealing with actually have been able to get small business loan financing. And because we are just a distressed community, they don't have to pay the SBA 2% loan fee. And we discovered that through CID when we were working with them to retain them. So we've been passing that on to a lot of the other companies that are looking to expand. So it's been a very, very busy time over the last 8 months, but it's an exciting time.
Questions for Paul?
Town Square building,
It's a great building.
isn't it great?
I love it.
Can you
I
sell
love
it?
the boardroom.
I mean, not sell the building, but sell the space.
Space, you know, they do have a couple new tenants in there. One right across from where I'm at. I've heard that they're close to on the quote-unquote incubator space over here, that they might have their first tenant there. And then we've been working with Wes on bringing another project here to downtown Washougal, a very exciting project. Wes is a major driver and asset in bringing this next project. So we'll know later this week. I know they pulled a demo permit, which is a good sign. But it would definitely help the businesses here in the downtown area.
Thank you. Any restaurants looking at us?
You know, there have been some that have had ideas around restaurants. Restaurants are one of the hardest things to finance. And, you know, it's been real tough. We've talked with Hearth. If we could get a few more employers, they might actually add a lunch menu, which I think would help out a great deal. That's one of the main requests that we're getting from prospective employers. We were working with a startup company, internet company, great leverage potential. There again had worldwide talent, folks that are doing the marketing campaigns for Nike. We're trying to help them get about $700,000 worth of seed money to get them off the ground. They've already put in about $500,000 of their own time and money into the project. And so we're still hopeful that may happen. And then we're working with just other businesses as well. But the restaurant, I think that would help out a great deal. I think some of that probably occur more once we get a few more hits in the downtown area and in the industrial park. I think once the port can get the 120 acres online, that'll help out a great deal. We could get clients out there today if we had that online.
Any other questions, comments? Paul, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, at this point, I would welcome any members of the public that would like to address council this evening. Okay, seeing none. Under Mayor's report, I have just one item on here. I did, myself and Councilmember Shoemaker did attend last week the school district's strategic planning kickoff for elected officials and business leaders. Was surprised it was a small group, but there is another opportunity coming up on March 6th at 6 p.m. I believe up at the high school, although I'm not sure exactly where in the high school they're going to do that one. There is another public meeting where they're inviting folks in to do basically the exact same thing that we went through as well. So they're trying to segregate out where they're getting responses from, but that will be the next opportunity for individuals as well. David, do you have anything that we haven't covered this evening? Okay, council members? County Joe?
Well, I have the privilege of attending something called Challenge Day. I've been invited by the Washougal High School and accepted. Had to take a day off work to do it because it's from 7:30 in the morning till 3:30 in the afternoon. And it's designed to work on bullying in the school environment. So they've found 100 students that would be willing to do this all-day event. And they've drawn from every sect, I guess you would call, or group. The football team, the cheerleaders, the druggies, the nerds, you name the group in the school, and they've asked students to attend. So pray for me. It's going to be a great fun day. I saw a video on it. Looks like it's kind of a touchy-feely thing where they want to encourage these groups to cross lines and come and talk with each other instead of bullying. So it should be a great program. I'll give you a report and how it turns out.
Good. Other items?
I just wanted to mention that I attended a Land for Jobs conference, which was put on by the Southwest Contractors Association. I'm not sure. I mean, there was a lot of talk, and one of the things that I found interesting was that there were actually several properties in Camas and Washougal that were on their list of things that were essentially not shovel-ready, but close, and several more in various stages of how long it would take to get them online. The biggest piece is actually up in the northeast corner of the city, and Public Works and Planning have been working for several years on getting water, and for instance the 32nd Street Stiles Road project that's on the capital facilities plan has a lot to do with being able to get up there, and the new reservoir number 4 up outside the city limits also would be able to supply water to that. So things are moving along. Not nearly as rapidly as anyone would like, but things are at least encouraging.
Thank you, Paul. Any last items? We're adjourned. Anybody TiVoing the Daytona 500 at home?
Is it on?
Sort of.
Did they rent it?
No, they.
I'm an IndyCar fan.
How's